Hello there everyone, welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Thomas Whitehorse, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. People call me Tom. What I'm about to tell you happened during my 12th year on the job. I'd seen lost hikers, bear attacks, people dying from the cold, but I'd never seen time itself become a weapon. I work at Mount Mitchell State Park in North Carolina. It's beautiful country, but it's got a dark history. My Cherokee grandmother used to tell me stories about shadow spirits that guard the old burial grounds. I never believed her, figured they were just old tales meant to keep kids from wandering off. I should have listened. October 1967 was cold, way colder than it should have been. The fog rolled in thick every morning, moving against the wind in ways that didn't make sense. I'd been doing search and rescue for most of my 12 years on the job, 47 successful missions. I knew these mountains like my own backyard. My wife Sarah died 2 years back in a car accident. That's when I really threw myself into this work. Figured if I could save other people's families, maybe it would help with the pain. The Cherokee elders always said this job was in my blood. My great-grandfather was a medicine man who knew these mountains when they were still wild. I had a new partner that fall, Carlos Martinez, fresh out of training, good kid, eager to prove himself. Maybe too eager. He'd been with me for 6 months, and he was starting to get confident. Sometimes that's dangerous in these mountains. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. The Henderson family hadn't been seen for 3 days. Mom, Dad, and 2 kids, 8 and 12 years old. They'd been camping near Grandfather Mountain, close to where the old burial mounds sit. That should have been my first warning. Martinez, I called to my partner as I grabbed my gear. We've got a family missing up near the sacred sites. He looked up from his coffee. Sacred sites. Cherokee burial grounds. Been there since around 1200 AD. Most folks don't even know they exist. I checked my radio, made sure the batteries were fresh. Local tribes still consider them holy ground. We loaded up the truck and headed out. The temperature was dropping fast, even though the sun was shining. My grandmother always said the spirits could change the weather when they were angry. I pushed that thought away. I was a professional. I dealt in facts, not ghost stories. The drive took us up winding mountain roads that got narrower with each mile. Cell phone towers didn't reach up here. Radio signals got weak. If something went wrong, we'd be on our own for hours. Tom, Martinez, said as we climbed higher, "You ever have families just vanish like this? Sometimes, usually, they wander off the trails, get turned around. Mountains can fool you, make you think you're going one way when you're really going another." But as I said it, something cold settled in my stomach. 3 days was a long time, too long for a family with young kids to survive if they were really lost. The fog was getting thicker. Our headlights barely cut through it, even though it was only noon. I'd never seen weather like this in October. It felt more like January, and the fog moved wrong, swirling in circles, staying in patches that should have blown away. Radio check. I called into my handset. Static answered me. Not normal static either. It sounded almost like voices, too far away to understand. Martinez tried his radio too. Same thing. Dead zone. I told him, but my voice sounded less sure than I wanted it to. Happens sometimes in the mountains. We parked at the end of the road and hiked in on foot. The Henderson family had been camping about 2 miles from the burial mounds, close enough to feel the history in the air, but not close enough to accidentally disturb anything sacred. At least, that's what I hoped. We found their campsite just before 2 p.m. Everything was wrong from the moment we stepped into the clearing. The tents were still up, sleeping bags laid out neat and tidy. But here's what made my skin crawl. There was food still warm in a pot over the fire. Coffee in a metal pot that was still hot to the touch. The embers were glowing red, like someone had just fed wood to the flames. "How long did you say they've been missing?" Martinez asked, staring at the warm coffee. 3 days. I touched the coffee pot with the back of my hand, hot enough to burn. This doesn't make sense. I started looking around the campsite more carefully, for sleeping bags, for backpacks, for sets of gear, but no people. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing that would tell us where they'd gone. Then Martinez called out from the edge of the clearing, "Tom, you need to see this." He was crouched down, staring at the ground. When I got closer, I saw footprints in the soft dirt. 4 sets, just like there should be. 2 adults, 2 kids. They led away from the campsite toward the burial mounds. I followed the tracks, Martinez right behind me. They were clear as day, for about 50 yards, then they just stopped. Not gradually, like the ground got too hard to hold prints. They just ended, mid-step, like the family had vanished into thin air. Maybe they climbed a tree, Martinez suggested, looking up, but there weren't any trees close enough. The footprints ended in the middle of an open space, surrounded by dirt that should have shown every step. I pulled out my compass to get our bearings. The needle spun like a broken toy, never settling on any direction. I tapped it, thinking maybe it was stuck, still spinning. "Check yours," I told Martinez. His did the same thing. 2 compasses, both acting crazy in the exact same way. That's when the temperature dropped. Not gradually like normal weather. It went from maybe 4 degrees to freezing cold in less than a minute. I could see my breath, white puffs in the air that shouldn't have been there. "What the hell?" Martinez said, pulling his jacket tighter. I was about to answer when we heard it. Voices singing, but not in English. The words were Cherokee, and I recognized the tune from my grandmother's stories. It was a death song, the kind they sang to help spirits find their way to the other world. The voices were coming from the direction of the burial mounds. "Could be the family," Martinez said, but his voice was shaky. "Maybe they're just ... singing." I knew better. The Henderson family was white, from Charlotte. They wouldn't know Cherokee death songs. And there was something wrong with the voices. They sounded too young, like children, but hollow somehow, empty. We followed the sound through the fog, which was getting thicker by the minute. Our flashlights barely cut through it now, even though it was still afternoon. The singing got louder as we walked, but it never seemed to get closer. Then Martinez grabbed my arm. "Tom, look." Through the fog, I could see shapes moving between the trees. Tall shapes, too tall to be human. They moved smooth and quiet, like they were floating instead of walking. "Animals," I said, trying to convince myself. "Just deer or something." But deer don't stand 12 feet tall, and they don't have arms that hang down to their knees. We kept walking toward the burial mounds, following the singing. The fog was so thick now we could barely see 10 feet ahead. That's probably why we almost stepped on them. The bodies, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, sitting side by side on the ground, backs against a big oak tree. Their eyes were open, staring straight ahead, but something was terribly wrong with them. Their hair was completely white, not gray like old people get, but pure white like fresh snow. Their skin was wrinkled and spotted like they'd aged 30 years in 3 days, but there was no smell of death, no signs of animals getting to them. They looked like they'd just sat down and died of old age. "My God," Martinez whispered. "What happened to them?" I checked for pulses, even though I knew there wouldn't be any. Their skin was cold but not stiff, like they'd died recently, maybe hours ago. But their appearance, it was impossible. "Where are the kids?" Martinez asked. That's when we heard the children singing again, closer now, but still hidden in the fog. The words were Cherokee, but I could make out what they meant. They were singing about waiting for their ancestors to come take them home. Martinez started walking toward the voices. "Maybe they're hurt. Maybe they need help." "Wait," I called, but he was already disappearing into the fog. I tried to follow, but the fog was like a wall now, thick and white, and moving in ways that fog shouldn't move. It swirled around me in circles, making me dizzy. When it finally cleared enough for me to see, Martinez was gone. I called Martinez's name until my throat was raw. The fog swallowed my voice like I was shouting into a pillow. I tried the radio, but all I got was that strange static that sounded like distant voices. Then I checked my watch. 3:47 p.m. I looked around for any sign of which way Martinez had gone, searching for maybe 10 minutes. When I checked my watch, again, it said 3:26 p.m. The hands were moving backward. I stared at it, thinking maybe I'd hit something, or maybe the cold was messing with the mechanism. But the second hand was definitely moving counterclockwise, slowly but steady. Then it stopped, started going forward again, but twice as fast as it should. That's when I heard Martinez calling my name. "Tom, Tom, help me." His voice was coming from deeper in the fog, somewhere near the burial mounds. I ran toward it, stumbling over roots and rocks I couldn't see. The children were still singing their death song, but now it sounded like they were all around me. "Martinez, where are you, Tom? Something's wrong. Something's very wrong." I kept running, but his voice stayed the same distance away no matter how fast I moved, like he was always just out of reach. Then the fog lifted for a moment, and I saw him. He was standing about 50 yards away, but something was different about him. His hair was streaked with gray. His face looked older, lined with wrinkles that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Martinez," I ran toward him, but the fog closed in again. When it cleared, he was gone. I found myself standing in front of the burial mounds, 3 low hills covered with stones, arranged in careful patterns that had been there for 800 years. My grandmother had told me never to step on them, never to disturb them in any way. The dead were sleeping there, she said, and some sleeps shouldn't be broken. The children's singing was coming from inside the mounds. I walked closer, even though everything in my body was telling me to run. The stones were covered with symbols I didn't recognize, carved deep into the rock. They looked fresh, like someone had just finished carving them. That's when I saw Martinez again. He was sitting on top of the center mound, but it wasn't really Martinez anymore. His hair was completely white now. His face aged and wrinkled like an old man's, but his eyes were still young and scared. "Tom," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from far away, even though he was right in front of me. I was only gone for a few minutes, but I lived through years in that place. Decades. What place? "Martinez, what happened to you?" He looked down at his hands, old and spotted now. "There's another world here, Tom, right next to ours, but different." I could see our world and theirs at the same time, like looking through 2 windows at once. The children's singing got louder. I could hear them clearly now, calling for their parents, calling for their ancestors to come take them home. "The Henderson kids," I said. "Are they there?" "Not really here," Martinez said. His voice was getting weaker. "They're echoes. They died here a long time ago, but they keep coming back. The Watchers used them as bait." Watchers. That's when I saw them. 3 figures stepped out from behind the burial mounds. They were tall, maybe 12 feet, with arms that hung down to their knees. Their skin was gray like old bark, and their eyes glowed amber in the fog. They moved without making a sound, floating just above the ground. One of them spoke, but not with its mouth. The words appeared in my head, in Cherokee first, then in English. Asterisk, "The young ones belong to us now, as does your companion." Asterisk. Martinez tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He looked at me with those young eyes and that old face. "Tom, run. Don't let them take you too." The biggest Watcher moved closer to me. When it spoke again, I could feel the words like ice in my brain. Asterisk. "You have disturbed sacred ground. You have brought others to disturb sacred ground. Now you must pay." Asterisk. It reached out one long arm toward me. I tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. The air around its hand shimmered like heat waves, and I felt something happening to my left arm. The skin started to wrinkle and spot, the muscles getting weak and painful. It was aging me, just like it had done to Martinez, just like it had done to the Henderson parents. I tried to remember what my grandmother had taught me about dealing with spirits. There were rituals, ways to show respect, ways to make peace with the dead. But I couldn't think clearly with that thing's voice in my head and my arm getting older by the second. Then I remembered something she used to say. The ancestors protect those who protect the ancestors. I pulled out my pocket knife and cut my palm, letting blood drip onto the stones of the burial mound. "I'm sorry," I said in Cherokee, using words I hadn't spoken since I was a child. "I'm sorry we disturbed your rest. I offer my blood in respect." The Watcher stopped, its glowing eyes fixed on me, and I felt its voice again. Asterisk. "One must stay. One must guard. Choose." Asterisk. I looked at Martinez, old and dying on top of the mound. Then I looked at my left arm, aged 20 years in just a few seconds. "Take me," I said. "Let him go." But Martinez shook his head. "No, Tom, I'm already gone. Look at me. I'm dying anyway." He was right. Even as I watched, he was getting older, weaker. The Watchers had taken too much from him already. "Tell him," he whispered, lying down on the stones. "Tell them to respect the dead." The fog closed in around us. When it cleared, Martinez was gone. Just gone, like he'd never been there at all. The watchers were gone too, but I could feel them watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. I was alone with the burial mounds and the singing of children who had died long ago. My left arm hung useless at my side, aged and weak. The skin was spotted and wrinkled like an old man's, but the rest of me was still 54. It hurt constantly, a deep ache like arthritis, but worse. I tried to walk back toward the campsite, but the fog was too thick. Every direction looked the same. I kept ending up back at the burial mounds no matter which way I went. That's when I realized the truth that Martinez had tried to tell me. This place existed in multiple times at once, past and present, mixed together like paint in water. I was seeing the world as it was now, but also as it had been centuries ago when the Cherokee lived here. Through the fog, I could see the shapes of ancient buildings that shouldn't have been there. Smoke from fires that had gone out hundreds of years ago. People moving through the trees, but they were see-through, like ghosts. The children's singing was coming from everywhere now. Not just the Henderson kids, but dozens of children who had died here over the centuries. All of them calling for their families, all of them trapped between worlds. I sat down on a fallen log and tried to think. The Watchers had taken Martinez because we'd disturbed sacred ground, but we hadn't meant to. We were just trying to find a missing family. Then, I understood. The Henderson family had disturbed the burial mounds somehow. Maybe they'd stepped on them. Maybe they'd taken something. Maybe they'd just camped too close. The Watchers had taken them as punishment, aging them to death and trapping their children's spirits here forever. And they'd used the children's voices to lure us in too. I heard footsteps in the fog. Heavy ones, too heavy to be human. The Watchers were coming back. This time there were more of them. 5 or 6 tall shapes moving through the mist like floating shadows. Their amber eyes glowed brighter now, and I could feel their anger like heat from a fire. The biggest one spoke in my head again. Asterisk, you still live. This cannot be. Asterisk, I showed respect. I said out loud. I offered blood on your sacred stones. Asterisk, not enough. You brought death to this place. You let others disturb our rest. Asterisk, the family didn't know. I said, they were just camping. They didn't mean any harm. Asterisk, ignorance is not innocence. The sacred ground must be protected. Asterisk, the Watchers started to close in around me. I could feel that terrible cold again. The cold that aged flesh and stopped hearts. My right arm started to tingle like it was falling asleep. Then I remembered something else my grandmother had taught me. The Cherokee believed that spirits could be negotiated with if you knew the right words and had the right offerings. I pulled out my tobacco pouch. I always carried one because my grandmother said tobacco was sacred to the spirits. I sprinkled it on the burial stones and spoke in Cherokee again. Great spirits, guardians of the dead, I offer tobacco and blood and my promise. I will protect this place. I will make sure no one disturbs your rest again. Let this be enough. The Watchers stopped moving. The biggest one stared at me with those glowing eyes. Asterisk, you would become guardian. You would give up your life among the living, if that's what it takes. Show us your commitment. Suddenly the air around me shimmered, and I could see everything clearly. The burial mounds weren't just 3 small hills, they were part of a vast cemetery that stretched for miles. Hundreds of graves, maybe thousands, all connected by invisible lines of power. And I could see the Watchers for what they really were. They had been Cherokee once, long ago. Medicine men and warriors who had chosen to stay behind when their tribes moved on to guard the sacred places forever. The centuries had changed them, made them something between human and spirit, but they were still protecting their people. I understand, I said. You're not monsters. You're guardians doing what you have to do. Yes, as you must do now. What happened to Martinez? To his body? Asterisk, he is with the ancestors now. His body feeds the sacred ground. Asterisk, I felt sick, but I nodded. And the Henderson family? Asterisk, the parents rest with the dead. The children, their spirits are trapped because they died in fear and confusion. They cannot find peace. Asterisk, can you free them? Asterisk, not us. Only a living guardian can guide lost spirits home. Asterisk, I understood. That was my job now. Not just to protect the burial grounds, but to help the spirits of people who died here find their way to whatever came next. The fog started to lift. Through the trees, I could see searchlights in the distance. The backup rangers had finally arrived. Go to them, the biggest Watcher said. Asterisk, tell them what they need to hear. But remember your promise. Asterisk, I'll remember. Asterisk and guardian ... There are other sacred places, other spirits who need protection. Your true work is just beginning. Asterisk. The backup rangers found me 2 hours later, sitting by the Henderson campsite. I told them Martinez had fallen into a ravine while searching for the missing family. I told them the Hendersons had died of exposure to the cold. Both lies, but some truths are too dangerous to tell. The medical examiner was baffled by the condition of Mr. and Mrs. Henderson's bodies. Looks like they aged 30 years overnight, he said. I've never seen anything like it. He was even more confused by my left arm. Premature aging condition, he wrote in his report. Cause unknown. The doctors in town ran every test they could think of, but couldn't explain how one arm could age 20 years while the rest of me stayed normal. I knew the truth. It was my mark, my reminder of what I'd promised. I put in for a transfer the next week, told my supervisor I needed to work somewhere that didn't remind me of losing my partner. They moved me to a park in Tennessee, far from Cherokee territory. But before I left, something happened that I'll never forget. I was cleaning out my office when an old Cherokee man walked in. I'd never seen him before, but he looked at my aged left arm and nodded. "You survived the trial," he said. "Not many do." "What trial?" "The spirits test everyone who comes too close to sacred ground. Most people fail. They die or go crazy or just disappear. But sometimes they find someone worthy to be a guardian." He handed me a small leather pouch filled with tobacco and other things I didn't recognize. "You'll need these," he said. "There are other places like Mount Mitchell, other spirits who need protection. Your work isn't finished." He left before I could ask any questions. That was 40 years ago. I've been to a dozen different parks since then, always the places where old peoples used to live and die. And yes, there are other spirits, other guardians, some human, some not so human anymore. I've learned to recognize the signs. Animals acting strange, whether that doesn't make sense. Radio static that sounds like voices. And always, the feeling that you're being watched by something that isn't quite alive and isn't quite dead. Most of the time, I can keep people away from the dangerous places. I post warning signs, close trails, make up stories about bear sightings or unstable ground. But sometimes people don't listen. Sometimes they go where they shouldn't go and disturb things that should stay undisturbed. When that happens, I do what I can to help the spirits find peace. It's not always possible. Some ghosts are too angry, too lost, too hungry for the warmth of the living. But I try. My left arm never got better. If anything, it's gotten worse over the years. Sometimes I think the aging is spreading, moving up my shoulder toward my heart. Maybe someday I'll become like the Watchers, something between human and spirit, guarding the places where the dead refuse to rest. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. If you're planning to go hiking in places where Native Americans used to live, listen to me. Respect the burial grounds. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. Don't camp too close to ancient sites. And if you hear children singing in a language you don't understand, turn around and walk away. Some guardians never rest, and some places exist in multiple times at once. I learned that the hard way on Mount Mitchell, and I've been learning it ever since. The dead protect what's sacred, but sometimes the living have to protect the dead. That's my job now. Has been for 40 years, and I'm still watching. My name is Margaret Ironcloud, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've been a park ranger in Alaska for 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen every way a person could die out here. The cold that turns your blood to ice, bears that can smell fear. From miles away, avalanches that bury you so deep they never find the body. I was wrong about that. Dead wrong. It was January 1972 when everything changed. I was 38 then, the first woman to make ranger in Alaska, and I'd earned every bit of respect through sheer grit. My grandfather used to tell me stories about the old days, when our Tlingit people would banish the worst criminals to the ice caves up north. Some hungers, he'd say, are too dangerous to feed. Back then, I thought he meant regular hunger, the kind that makes desperate people do terrible things. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. An Arctic research station up in Glacier Bay had gone quiet during a Category 5 blizzard. 6 scientists studying ice patterns completely cut off when the storm hit. The radio went dead 3 days ago, and the weather was still too bad for helicopters. You and Sullivan take the snowmobiles. Chief Morrison told me. Check on them. Bring them back if you can. Jake Sullivan was my usual partner, an Irish guy with 8 years under his belt and a joke for every bad situation. We'd worked together plenty of times, and I trusted him with my life. He was loading supplies when I walked over to the garage. "Hey Maggie," he said, not looking up from the pack. "Heard we're playing rescue squad in a blizzard. Fun times." "Could be worse," I said. "Could be bears. Bears don't shoot at you when they're scared." Jake had been military police before, joining the Rangers, at least, not usually. The ride up took 6 hours through snow, so thick I couldn't see Jake's headlight 10 feet ahead of me. The temperature was 47 below, cold enough to freeze spit before it hits the ground. The wind howled like something dying, and more than once I had to stop because I couldn't tell which way was up. When we finally reached the research station, everything looked wrong. The building was still standing, but barely. One wall had caved in, and there were long scratches in the metal siding that looked like claw marks. But they were too big for any animal I knew, and they went from the ground all the way up to the roof. "Generators still running," Jake said, checking the outside panel. "But look at this." He pointed to the door. It was hanging open, banging in the wind. Snow had piled up inside the entrance, but underneath it I could see dark stains on the floor. "Blood?" I asked. "Lot of it." Jake pulled out his flashlight. "And it's frozen solid. Been there a while." We went inside together, weapons drawn. The place was a mess. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere, and more of those strange scratches on the walls. But what really bothered me was the cold. It was colder inside than outside, which made no sense with the generator running. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone here? This is the Park Service." Nothing, not even an echo. Jake moved toward the back rooms while I checked the main area. The scientists had been studying ice core samples, and their equipment was still set up. Charts and graphs covered one wall, showing temperature patterns going back hundreds of years. That's when I found the first journal. It was lying open on a desk, pages fluttering in the cold air coming through cracks in the walls. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had been writing in a hurry, or while they were scared. Day 12, storm getting worse. Radio's dead. Henderson thinks we can wait it out, but food's running low. Found some extra canned meat in the storage room. Labels worn off, but meat is meat. Day 15, Henderson's been acting strange. Keeps staring at the rest of us like we're dinner. Maybe it's just the stress. We're all on edge. Day 18, God help us. We know what we ate. Henderson found the real labels in the storage room. The cans weren't beef. They were ... I can't write it. But we're all sick now. Throwing up. And so hungry. Always hungry. My hands were shaking as I read the last entry. Day 20, Henderson tastes like pork. So hungry, so cold, something's coming. Something big. We can hear it outside, walking around the building, waiting. Maggie. Jake's voice came from the back room. "You need to see this." I found him in what looked like a kitchen area. Pots and pans were scattered across the floor, and there was a big cooking pot sitting on the cold stove. Jake was staring into it with a sick look on his face. "Don't look," he said, but I already had. There were bones in the pot, small ones, finger bones, maybe, and they had been chewed on. "Where are the bodies?" I asked. "That's just it," Jake said. "There aren't any, just clothes scattered around the back rooms. And these." He held up something that made my stomach turn. It was a piece of meat, fresh meat, in a can with no label. "Found a whole case of these in the pantry," Jake said. "They were eating them right before we got here, still warm." I looked at the meat in his hand, and something cold crawled up my spine. It was too pink to be beef, too smooth to be pork. "Jake," I said slowly, "put that down." But he was already opening it with his pocket knife. "I'm starving," he said. "Rode 6 hours through a blizzard. A little mystery meat won't kill me." "Don't," I said. But it was too late. He'd already taken a bite. Jake chewed slowly, like he was thinking about the taste. Then his eyes went wide. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh Jesus Christ." He dropped the can and ran to the corner, throwing up until there was nothing left. But when he looked back at me, there was something different in his eyes, something hungry. "It's not beef," he said, wiping his mouth. "It's not beef. Maggie, I know." I was backing toward the door. "We need to leave now." "But I'm still hungry." He stood up slowly, and I noticed how he was looking at me, like he was seeing me for the first time, really hungry. That's when we heard it. A sound from outside, not the wind. Something else. Something big, moving around the building. Footsteps crunching in the snow. But the steps were wrong. Too long. Between them, like whatever was making them had really long legs. Jake's head snapped toward the sound, and when he looked back at me, his pupils were huge, almost black. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah." I had my hand on my gun. "Something's out there." The footsteps stopped right outside the wall where we were standing. Then came a sound I'll never forget, like fingernails on a chalkboard, but deeper, louder. Something was scratching at the metal siding. Jake walked over to the wall and put his ear against it. "Don't," I said, but he wasn't listening. The scratching stopped. Everything went quiet except for the wind. Then something hit the wall so hard it shook the whole building. Jake jumped back and we both heard it. A voice, low and rough, like someone talking through a mouthful of gravel. "Hungry," it said. "So hungry. Who's out there?" I called out. "This is the Park Service. Identify yourself." The voice laughed. It was the worst sound I'd ever heard. Like wind, blowing through a graveyard. "Park Service," it repeated, and the voice was different now. Clearer. "Nice uniform. Maggie, you smell good." How did it know my name? Jake was pressed against the wall, breathing hard. "It's one of the scientists," he said. "Has to be. Survived somehow." But I was looking at those claw marks on the walls. No human hand made those. The thing outside started walking around the building again, and I could track its movement by the footsteps. It was big, really big, and it was taking its time, like it was studying the place, looking for the best way in. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Where?" Jake asked. "It's out there, and there's nowhere to run in this storm." He was right. The blizzard was still going strong, and our snowmobiles were parked right outside. We'd have to go past whatever was out there to reach them. The footsteps stopped again, this time at the front door. The handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open. Snow blew in, and with it came a smell like old meat and wet fur. "Hello," the voice called softly. "Anyone home?" I pulled my gun and aimed it at the doorway. Jake did the same, but his hands were shaking. A shadow moved across the entrance, tall, way too tall. It had to duck to fit through the door, and when it straightened up inside, its head almost touched the ceiling. "There you are," it said. I couldn't see it clearly in the dim light, but I could make out the shape, like a person, but wrong. Arms too long, legs too thin, and something growing out of its head that looked like branches. "Stay back," I shouted. "Don't come any closer." It laughed again. "Or what? You'll shoot me." The thing took a step forward, and I could see its eyes. They were black, completely black, just like Jake's were getting. "Already tried that," it said in a different voice. Henderson's voice didn't work so well. That's when I noticed Jake wasn't pointing his gun at the thing anymore. He was pointing it at me. "Jake, sorry Maggie," he said, and his voice sounded strange. "Thick, but you smell so good, and I'm so hungry." The thing in the doorway smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. "That's it," it said. "Let the hunger in, let it fill you up." Jake's finger was on the trigger, and his eyes were completely black now, but he was fighting it. I could see him shaking, trying to resist whatever was happening to him. "Fight it, Jake," I said. "Whatever this thing is doing to you, fight it." "Can't," he whispered. "Too hungry, need to eat, need to feed." The creature took another step forward, and now I could see it. Clearly, it wasn't human, had never been human. Its skin was grey and stretched tight over bones that were too long. Its fingers ended in claws, and antlers grew from its skull like a crown of bone. "Don't fight it," it told Jake. "Embrace the hunger. Become what you were meant to be." Jake turned the gun back, toward the creature. "Get away from her," he said through gritted teeth. "Brave boy," the thing said. "But you've already tasted the meat, already let the hunger in. You belong to me now." It reached out one long arm toward Jake, and when its claws touched his shoulder, he screamed. Jake's scream cut off suddenly, and he went rigid. The thing had its claws on his shoulder, and I could see black veins spreading from where it touched him, like poison moving through his body. "Let him go." I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the creature center mass, but it didn't even flinch. It just looked at me with those black eyes and smiled. "Bullets don't work on hunger," it said. "Nothing stops hunger." Jake suddenly straightened up, and when he looked at me, he wasn't Jake anymore. His eyes were solid black, and his mouth was hanging open, showing teeth that looked sharper than they should be. "Maggie," he said in a voice that wasn't his. You look so tender, so fresh. I backed toward the rear of the building. Jake, listen to me, you're sick. This thing is making you sick, but you can fight it. Not sick, he said, following me step by step. Just hungry. Do you know what human tastes like, Maggie? It's sweet, like the best meat you ever had. The creature laughed and let go of Jake's shoulder. Show her, it said. Show her what we are. Jake lunged at me, moving faster than any human should be able to move. I barely got out of the way, and his fingernails, no claws now, raked across my jacket, tearing through the thick material like it was paper. Jake, stop. But he wasn't stopping. He came at me again, and this time I couldn't dodge. He tackled me to the ground, and his hands went straight for my throat. Just one bite, he whispered, his face inches from mine. Just let me have one bite. His breath smelled like raw meat and death. I could see that his teeth really were sharper now, pointed like an animal's. He was changing, becoming something else. I got my knee up between us and kicked him as hard as I could. He flew backward and hit the wall, but he landed on his feet like a cat. Strong, the creature said approvingly. Good. The meat tastes better when it fights. I pulled my gun again and aimed it at Jake. I don't want to hurt you. You can't hurt me, he said. Not anymore. He was right. When I shot him, the bullet caught him in the chest, but he just looked down at the hole in his shirt and laughed. Doesn't hurt, he said. Nothing hurts when you're this hungry. That's when I realized we weren't alone. There were other voices outside now, calling my name, but they were using the same tone Jake was using. That hungry, hunting tone. The others, the creature said. My children. They want to meet you. Shadows moved past the windows. More than one. They were surrounding the building. 6 researchers, I said. He turned them all. Turned them. The creature tilted its head. I freed them. Freed them from the weakness of civilization, from the lie that humans are anything more than meat. Jake was moving toward me again, but slower this time, like he was enjoying the hunt. You know what the worst part is, he said in his own voice. Just for a second. I can still think, still remember who I was, but I can't stop wanting to eat you. Then his voice changed back to that hungry whisper. And you're going to taste so good. I ran for the back door, but it was blocked. 2 figures stood in the doorway, wearing the torn remains of research team uniforms. A man and a woman, both with those same black eyes and sharp teeth. Going somewhere? The woman asked. I was trapped. Jake behind me, 2 more of those things, at the back door, and the original creature blocking the front. The windows were too small to climb through, and even if I could, there were more of them outside. What do you want? I asked. To feed, the creature said. It's been so long since fresh meat came to us. Usually we have to hunt, track prey through the snow for days. But you came right to us, like a delivery, Jake said, and he laughed. The woman at the back door stepped forward. We've been so hungry, eating each other, but it's not the same. Not as good as fresh meat. I noticed something then. The scratches on the walls weren't claw marks from the outside. They were from the inside. These things had been trapped in here, clawing at the walls, trying to get out. You've been here since the storm started, I said. Longer, the creature said. Much longer. We've been waiting in the ice caves up north, waiting for someone to wake us up. The research team found you. They found our home, disturbed our sleep. The creature's eyes gleamed. So we followed them back, made them understand what real hunger feels like. Jake was close enough to touch me now. Stop talking, he said. I can't wait anymore. He grabbed for me, but I was ready this time. I dodged left and ran for the front door, straight at the creature. It was so surprised that I made it past, out into the blizzard. The cold hit me like a wall, but I kept running. Behind me, I could hear them coming, all of them. Run, little rabbit, the creature called. Run and make the meat tender. I couldn't see the snowmobiles through the snow, but I knew they were somewhere ahead. If I could just reach them, start one up, maybe I could get away. Something grabbed my ankle. I fell face first into the snow and rolled over to see Jake crawling toward me. Half his face was frozen, but he was still smiling. Found you, he said. I kicked him in the face as hard as I could. His nose broke with a wet crack, but he didn't stop smiling. Doesn't hurt, he said again. Nothing hurts anymore. The other creatures were coming through the storm now. I could see their shapes moving through the snow like ghosts. To many of them, I got to my feet and kept running, but I was lost now. Couldn't see anything in the whiteout. The wind was so loud I couldn't hear if they were still following me. Then I saw it, a darker shape in the snow ahead. Not the snowmobiles, something else, a cave, cut into the side of a glacier, just big enough for a person to crawl into. I didn't have a choice. I went in. The cave was bigger inside than it looked. My flashlight showed smooth ice walls stretching back into darkness. It was warmer here, protected from the wind, but something felt wrong about the place. There were things frozen in the ice, shapes that might have been animals once, or people, and scattered on the floor were bones. Old bones, picked clean. This was their home, the creature's lair. "Welcome," a voice said behind me. I spun around to see the creature ducking through the cave entrance. Behind it came Jake and the others, their black eyes reflecting my flashlight like mirrors. "Welcome to our home," the creature said. "This is where it all began, where your people left us to die, so long ago." "My people," Clifton said, and I heard my grandfather's voice in the word. "Your ancestors knew what we were, what we became after we tasted the forbidden meat. They banished us here to starve. But you didn't starve." "Oh, we starved." The creature smiled. "We starved for so long we became hunger itself, pure need, pure want. And when people are desperate enough, hungry enough, they'll eat anything." It gestured to the bones on the floor. "Trappers, hunters, lost travelers. They come to our caves seeking shelter, and we give them food, special food. Then we wait." "The cannibalism," I said. "It changes people. It opens them up, makes them receptive, allows us to share our gift." The creature took a step closer. "Your partner knows now, knows what it feels like to truly hunger." Jake moved up beside the creature. His skin was gray now, stretched tight like the others, but his eyes were still human underneath the black. "I can still hear myself," he said in his real voice. "Still hear Jake Sullivan in here, but I can't control what I do. Can't stop wanting to tear you apart and eat you piece by piece. Because that's what you are now," the creature said. "What you were always meant to be. Predators, hunters. The hunger drives you, and the hunger never lies." The other creatures were spreading out around me. 6 of them now, all former humans who'd made the mistake of eating the wrong meat in the wrong place. "We can't leave these caves," the creature continued. "Can't go back to the world. The cold keeps us strong, keeps us focused, but it also keeps us trapped. So you need fresh meat to come to you. Research stations, hunting lodges, always someone desperate enough, hungry enough." It laughed. "And they always bring friends." I was backing deeper into the cave, but I could feel the ice wall behind me. Nowhere left to run. "Don't be afraid," Jake said, and for a moment he sounded like himself again. "It doesn't hurt. The hunger takes the pain away, takes everything away except the need to feed. I won't become like you." "You don't have a choice," the creature said. "You're going to die here either way. But if you eat what we give you, you'll come back. You'll join us. Isn't that better than just being meat?" One of the other creatures stepped forward, a young man who might have been a grad student. "I didn't want this," he said. "But now, I can't imagine wanting anything else. The hunger is so pure, so honest." They were all moving closer now. I pulled out my gun, but I only had a few bullets left, and they'd already shown that bullets didn't stop them. "What if I don't eat it?" I asked. "What if I just let you kill me?" "Then you just die," the creature said. "No coming back, no joining the family, just dead meat." Jake was close enough to touch me now. "Please, Maggie," he said in his own voice. "Don't make me eat you while you're still alive. Just take one bite, and we can be together forever." I looked at his face, at what was left of my partner in those black eyes, and I made my choice. I put the gun to my own head. "No," I said, "I won't become like you." The creature hissed. "You would rather die than join us." "I'd rather die than become a monster." "Then you're a fool." It nodded to the others. "Take her." They rushed me all at once. I pulled the trigger, but Jake knocked my arm aside at the last second. The bullet went wild, hitting the ice wall behind me. They pinned me down, their claws digging into my arms and legs. The creature knelt beside me, holding something in its hand, a piece of meat. "Open your mouth," it said. "Let the hunger in." I kept my lips pressed shut, but Jake grabbed my jaw and forced it open. "Sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The creature pushed the meat toward my mouth, and I could smell it, sweet and fresh and terrible. That's when I remembered the flare gun in my jacket pocket. I'd forgotten about it during the chase, but now I could feel it pressing against my ribs. Emergency signaling device. Every ranger carried one. With my free hand, I grabbed it and fired. The flare hit the creature in the chest and stuck there, burning white hot. It screamed and stumbled backward, clawing at the phosphorus that was eating through its skin. Fire, it shrieked. Fire burns. Fire hurts. I rolled away from the others and fired my second flare at the cave wall. The phosphorus splattered across the ice, melting it, sending up clouds of steam. The creatures were screaming now, backing away from the light and heat. They covered their eyes and pressed themselves against the far wall. It burns, Jake cried. Oh God, it burns. I ran for the cave entrance, firing my last flare behind me. It hit one of the research team members and set his clothes on fire. He ran screaming deeper into the cave. Outside, the storm was starting to break. I could see stars through the clouds, and in the distance, the lights of the research station. I ran toward those lights, not looking back even when I heard them screaming my name. Even when I heard Jake begging me to come back, to save him. I reached the station and found my emergency pack. More flares. A can of gasoline for the generator. Then I went back. The cave was easy to find again. I just followed the screaming. They were still inside, still afraid of the light from the flares. I could see their eyes glowing in the darkness, watching me. Maggie, Jake called. Help me, please help me. I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to go in there and try to save him. But I'd seen what he'd become, what they'd all become. Instead, I poured the gasoline round the cave entrance and lit it. The fire roared up the walls, filling the cave with light and heat. The screaming got louder, more desperate. I heard Jake calling my name one last time, in his own voice, then silence. I waited until the fire burned itself out. Then I went back to the station. The radio was still broken, but I had emergency flares. Someone would see them and send help. They found me 3 days later, half frozen and babbling about monsters in the ice. The rescue team searched the caves but didn't find anything except bones. Old bones, they said. Probably from animals. Jake's body was in the burned-out cave, along with the research team. The official report said they died from exposure and equipment failure. A tragic accident. I let them believe that. I requested immediate transfer to a warmer climate, somewhere far from ice and snow. They gave me Yellowstone, and I've been there ever since. 30 years now, and I still can't eat meat. Haven't touched a piece since that day. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about Jake. He's standing outside my cabin, knocking on the door. Let me in, Maggie, he says. I'm so hungry, and you smell so good, but I never open the door. I wrote the real story down and sealed it in a safe deposit box. Instructions for it to be opened only after my death. Maybe someone will believe it. Maybe they'll know to stay away from the ice caves up north. Or maybe they won't. People get hungry. People get desperate. And when they do, they'll eat anything. Even meat that tastes too much like pork. Even meat that changes them. Even meat that makes them hungry for more. The Wendigo is still out there, still waiting in the ice. Still patient. And there are always more research stations. Always more people who get lost in the cold. Always more chances to feed. My name is Margaret Ironcloud, and I survived something that shouldn't exist. But surviving isn't the same as escaping. Some hungers, like my grandfather said, are too dangerous to feed. Some hungers are contagious, and some hungers never die. They just wait. My name is Vincent Ravenwood, but everyone just calls me Vince. I've been a ranger here in the Boundary Waters for 18 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Bears, wolves, lost campers, bad weather. Nothing surprised me anymore. At least, that's what I told myself until August of 1981. I'm 42 years old, and I came to these woods for the same reason a lot of Vietnam vets did, looking for peace. The silence here helped quiet the noise in my head. My cabin sits 15 miles from the nearest road, just me in a million acres of wilderness. It's exactly how I like it. The Boundary Waters canoe area is special. French fur trappers worked these lakes and rivers back in the 1800s, and they left behind stories. Stories about creatures they called loups-garous, wolfmen, that hunted in packs. I always figured those old French guys spent too much time alone with their whiskey. Danny Morrison was my new partner that summer. Fresh out of college at 26 months on the job, still excited about everything. The kid reminded me of myself before the war, back when I thought the world made sense. Vince, Look at this, Danny said. Crouching next to our morning coffee, he held up a radio message. 4 campsites hit this week. 11 dead, 3 missing. I took the paper and read it twice. Animal attacks weren't unusual, but this many in such a short time. That was different. Could be a rabid bear, Danny suggested, or maybe a pack of wolves got too comfortable around humans. I'd seen bear attacks. I'd seen wolf kills. This felt wrong somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The August heat wasn't helping. It was the warmest summer on record, and animals were acting strange all over the area. Full moons in 3 days, I said, not sure why that felt important. Danny laughed. You don't believe in that old moon madness stuff, do you? I didn't answer. After Vietnam, I learned to trust feelings I couldn't explain. They kept me alive over there. We packed our gear and headed out to investigate the first attack site. The morning mist was just lifting off the lake, and everything looked peaceful, normal. But underneath that calm surface, something was stirring. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about these woods. As we paddled across the still water, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The forest felt different to quiet, like even the birds knew to stay away. 18 years I've been doing this job, I told Danny as we reached the first campsite. I thought I understood these woods. What we found there would prove me very, very wrong. The first campsite looked like a tornado had hit it. Tents were shredded, camping gear scattered everywhere, and there was blood, a lot of blood. Jesus, Danny whispered, covering his nose with his shirt. The smell was awful, not just death, but something else, something wild and musky that made my skin crawl. I knelt down next to what was left of the tent. The tears in the fabric weren't random. They showed pattern, purpose, intelligence. Danny, look at this. I pointed to marks in the dirt. These aren't bear claws. The tracks were bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen, but they had the right shape. Sort of. Some of them looked normal enough, but others ... Others looked wrong. Like the animal had been walking on its back legs. Maybe they stood up to reach something, Danny suggested, but his voice wasn't confident. We followed the tracks toward the tree line. That's when things got really strange. Halfway to the woods, the paw prints just ... changed. One step showed clear wolf tracks. The next showed what looked like human footprints. Bare human feet with unusually long toes. That's impossible, Danny said, staring at the tracks. I'd been thinking the same thing, but seeing it written in the dirt made my blood run cold. In 18 years, I'd never seen anything like it. We found the second campsite an hour later. Same destruction, same smell, same impossible tracks. But this time, we found something else. A little girl was sitting in a tree about 50 yards from the ruined camp. 8 years old, blonde hair matted with dirt and tears. She was clutching a stuffed rabbit and shaking like a leaf. "Hey there, sweetheart," I called up to her. "My name's Vince. I'm a ranger. You're safe now." It took 20 minutes to coax Emma Hartley down from that tree. She wouldn't let go of either of us once her feet hit the ground. "Where's your family, Emma?" Danny asked gently. She pointed toward the destroyed campsite. "The wolves got them." "Wolves?" I knelt down to her level. "Can you tell me what happened?" Emma's eyes went wide. They weren't regular wolves. They stood up like people, and they had hands with big claws. Danny and I looked at each other. Kids have wild imaginations, especially after trauma. But the way she said it, the detail in her voice, it didn't sound like make-believe. "They came when it got dark," Emma continued. "Mummy told me to climb the tree and hide. She said, 'Don't come down, no matter what I heard.'" The girl started crying again. I wanted to comfort her, but I needed to know more. "Emma, these wolves that stood up, how many were there?" She held up both hands, then put down 3 fingers. 7. They worked together like they were talking, but they didn't make words, just growls and looks. 7. I thought about the tracks we'd been following. 7 distinct sets, just like Emma said. They folded up Daddy's clothes, she added quietly. After they ... After. They folded them real neat and put them in a pile. That detail hit me like a punch to the gut. Animals don't fold clothes. They don't organize their kills. They certainly don't work in coordinated groups of 7. On the radio back to headquarters, I reported a severe animal attack and requested immediate evacuation for the child. I didn't mention the standing wolves or the folded clothes. Who would believe that? But as we waited for the helicopter, Emma drew pictures on the back of my notepad. Pictures of wolves with human eyes, walking on two legs, with long arms, ending in claws. In every picture, they were smiling. They liked what they were doing, she said simply. You could see it, in their faces. That night, back at our camp, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow looked like it might be moving. Every sound in the forest seemed too close, too deliberate. Around midnight, Danny shook me awake. "Vince," he whispered, "we've got company." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. Fresh tracks circled our entire campsite. 7 sets of them, just like Emma had said. They started as wolf prints, but ended as human footprints, as if whatever made them had been studying us, learning to walk like us. The tracks were still warm. The next morning brought more bad news. 2 more campsites hit during the night, both within 10 miles of where we were staying. The pattern was getting bolder, more aggressive. "They're not afraid of us anymore," I told Danny as we examined the latest attack site. "Look at this." They came right up to the fire. Normal wolves would never do that. Danny was quiet, studying something in the dirt. "Vince, come look at this." He was crouched next to a clear footprint, human-shaped, but with claws instead of toenails. The print was fresh, maybe an hour old. "That's not possible," I said, but the evidence was right there in front of us. "Maybe it's a person," Danny suggested weakly. "Someone with a deformity, or wearing some kind of fake claws." I wanted to believe that. It would make everything so much simpler. But I'd seen the destroyed campsites, the coordinated attacks, the impossible strength it would take to tear apart tents like tissue paper. That afternoon, while checking another site, Danny suddenly grabbed my arm. "Don't move," he whispered. "Something's watching us." I slowly turned my head toward where he was looking. At the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the shadows, something tall was standing between 2 pine trees. At first glance it looked like a person, a very tall person. Then it moved. The thing dropped to all 4s and melted into the forest faster than anything that size had a right to move. But not before I got a good look at it. It was covered in dark fur. Its arms were too long, its back legs bent wrong, and its head, God help me, its head was shaped like a wolf's. But it was thinking behind those yellow eyes. "Planning, did you see that?" Danny's voice was shaking. "Yeah, I saw it." We started back toward camp, moving faster than usual. Neither of us wanted to admit what we'd just witnessed, but we both knew something impossible was happening in these woods. That evening, as we set up our tent, Danny rolled up his sleeves to wash his hands in the lake. That's when I saw the marks on his shoulder, 4 parallel scratches, deep and already turning red round the edges. "When did that happen?" I asked. Danny looked down at his shoulder, confused. I don't know. Must have caught it on a branch or something. But those weren't branch scratches. Those were claw marks, and they were getting infected fast. As night fell, the howling started. Not from one direction, but from 7 different points around our campsite. The sounds weren't quite wolf howls. They had too much intelligence in them, too much purpose. Danny was getting sick. His fever spiked as darkness settled in, and he kept scratching at the wounds on his shoulder. Worse, he was changing in other ways. His hearing became impossibly sharp. He could hear sounds I couldn't even detect. His sense of smell got stronger too. "Something's wrong with me," he admitted around midnight. "I can smell everything. The fear on that little girl yesterday, the blood at the campsites, the scent of whatever's been following us." His eyes were different too. In the firelight, they reflected gold like an animal's. "Danny, we need to get you to a doctor." "No." His voice was deeper, rougher. "It's too late for that. I can feel it changing me. Whatever bit me, whatever's in those scratches, it's in my blood now." The howling got closer. 7 voices calling to each other in the darkness, coordinating, planning, and Danny was starting to respond to them. His head would tilt when they called, like he was listening to something I couldn't understand. "They're coming," he said, standing up from our fire. "They're coming for me." I looked around our small camp. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The howls were so close now I could hear breathing between them. Heavy, deliberate breathing from creatures much larger than ordinary wolves. Then I saw them. 7 pairs of yellow eyes watching us from the tree line. 7 massive shapes that stood too tall, moved too smoothly. As I watched, one of them rose up on its hind legs to get a better view of our camp. It was at least 8 feet tall. Silver streaks ran through its dark fur, and when it looked at me, I knew I was staring at something ancient and intelligent. something that had been hunting in these woods for longer than anyone could remember. The pack leader, the alpha. Danny walked toward them. "Don't," I called after him. "Danny, fight it. Whatever's happening to you, fight it." He stopped at the edge of our firelight and turned back to me. His face was changing, his jaw pushing forward, his teeth getting longer and sharper. "I can hear them, Vince. They're telling me things. About the hunts, about the territory, about what I'm becoming." His voice was barely human now. "They say it's better. They say the hunger goes away once you stop fighting it." I reached for it, my service weapon, but my hand was shaking. This was Danny, my partner, the college kid who reminded me there was still good in the world. "You have to kill me," he said, and for just a moment, his voice sounded normal again, human, terrified. "Before I become like them, before I hurt someone." The transformation was accelerating. His clothes were tearing as his body expanded. Claws were pushing through his fingernails. His face was stretching into something that wasn't human anymore. Behind him, the pack stepped out of the trees. I'd seen horror in Vietnam, but nothing like this. Danny was screaming as his body changed, his bones cracking and reforming, muscles expanding beyond human limits. The sound coming from his throat wasn't entirely human anymore. The pack surrounded us, 7 massive creatures that walked like men but moved like predators. Their leader, the one with silver-streaked fur, was enormous. When it stood on its hind legs, it towered over me by 3 feet. But the worst part wasn't their size or their claws or their yellow eyes. It was the intelligence. These weren't mindless beasts. They were thinking, planning, communicating without words. And they were enjoying this. "They're not just wolves," I said, backing toward our supply pack. "They're people. Cursed people." The alpha's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, showing teeth like railroad spikes. It nodded once, slowly, as if confirming my guess. Danny's transformation was almost complete. Where my partner had been standing, a 7-foot-tall creature now crouched on powerful legs. Its face was stretched into a wolf's muzzle, but Danny's eyes were still there, pleading with me. "Kill, ... me, ... he managed to say through his changing throat. I reached into my pack and grabbed the only thing that might help. My grandfather's silver compass. It had been in my family for 3 generations. Brought over from Scotland, where my great-grandfather had learned about creatures like this. The alpha saw the silver and snarled. The pack tensed, ready to attack. "Silver hurts you, doesn't it?" I held the compass up where they could all see it. That's why the old stories always mentioned silver bullets. Danny lunged at me. I had to make a choice in that split second. Let my partner kill me, or kill the thing he'd become. The compass felt heavy in my hand as I drove it into his chest. Danny's scream turned into a howl that echoed across the lake. The silver burned through him like acid, and he collapsed to the ground, changing back to human form as he died. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his body. "I'm so sorry." The pack erupted in rage. The alpha threw back its head and howled, a sound full of grief and fury. The others answered, and suddenly they were all moving at once. I'd never seen anything move so fast. They came at me from all directions, coordinating their attack without a sound. I rolled away from the first one, swinging the compass like a weapon. Where the silver touched fur, it left smoking burns. But there were 7 of them, and 1 of me. Claws raked across my back, tearing through my jacket like paper. I spun around and caught another one across the face with the compass. It screamed and stumbled backward, silver burning a line across its muzzle. The alpha grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground. Its claws dug into my neck, and I could smell its breath, hot and rank and wrong. This close, I could see the human intelligence in its eyes. This thing had been a person once, maybe decades ago, maybe longer. "What are you?" I gasped. It didn't answer with words, but somehow I understood. Images flashed through my mind, memories that weren't mine. A French trapper, alone in the woods, finding something he shouldn't have found. A curse passed down, through bite and blood, endless nights of hunting, of feeding, of becoming less human with each full moon. I pressed the silver compass against its chest. The alpha dropped me and staggered backward, howling in pain. The other pack members froze, uncertain without their leader's direction. "That's right," I said, getting to my feet. "You remember? Silver, don't you? You remember what it means." The alpha looked at me with something that might have been respect, or maybe hunger. It was hard to tell with creatures like this. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they melted back into the forest. The alpha went last, keeping its yellow eyes on me until the darkness swallowed it completely. I was alone with Danny's body and the dying fire. The helicopter came at dawn. I told them Danny had been killed by wolves, which was technically true. They believed me, who wouldn't? The official report blamed the attacks on a rabid pack that had wandered down from Canada. Emma Hartley was placed with relatives in Minneapolis. She stopped talking for 6 months after what happened to her family. When she finally spoke again, it was only to warn people about bad dog people that lived in the deep woods. I requested a transfer to a desk job, but they kept me in the field, said I was too valuable to waste on paperwork. They didn't understand that some knowledge is too dangerous to carry. I started researching everything I could find about werewolves, shapeshifters, and Native American stories about wolf spirits. I bought silver bullets for my service weapon and had a silversmith make me a new compass to replace the one I'd used to kill Danny. The pack is still out there. Every month during the full moon, I hear howling from deep in the boundary waters. 7 voices calling to each other across the wilderness. Sometimes I think I hear Danny's voice among them, but that's impossible. I made sure he was dead. I've set up a warning system with other rangers, coded phrases we can use if we see signs of unusual animal activity. I see Danny's face as he changed, hear his final plea for me to kill him. I wake up wondering if I did the right thing, or if I just condemned him to something worse than death. But the worst dreams are the ones where I'm running through the forest, and I realize I'm not running away from the pack, I'm running with them. In those dreams, I can taste the hunt, feel the joy of coordinated killing, understand the simple pleasure of giving in to something wild and hungry. I touch the silver compass around my neck and remind myself that I'm still human, still fighting, because the truth is, once you know these things exist, once you've looked into their eyes and seen the intelligence there, you can never really feel safe again. Every shadow might be hiding something that was once human. Every howl in the distance might be calling your name. Emma was right about one thing. They like what they do. They enjoy the hunt, the fear, the moment when their prey realizes that all the old stories are true. The French trappers knew. That's why they left warnings in their journals, why they told stories about the loup. They were trying to protect people from something that can't be reasoned with, can't be negotiated with, and can't be stopped, only survived. The pack of boundary waters is still out there, somewhere in that 1,000,000 acres of wilderness, waiting for the next full moon, waiting for the next group of campers who wander too far from the marked trails. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the moon is dark, I swear I can hear them calling to me, telling me that the invitation is still open, that the hunger will go away once I stop fighting it. I keep my silver compass close and my service weapon loaded. Some legends exist to protect us. The pack still hunts these waters. My name is Franklin Ashworth, but everyone calls me Frank. I've been a forest ranger for 14 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. I was wrong. It was September 1959, and the rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Olympic National Forest. The kind of rain that soaks through everything and makes the whole world feel heavy and dark. I was 35 years old then, and I'd been working this same stretch of forest since I got back from the war in the Pacific. Some folks asked why I wanted to be alone out here in the middle of nowhere. Truth is, after what I saw in those islands, the quiet of the forest felt like medicine. I knew every trail, every creek, every old-growth grove in my section. I could tell you which trees were sick just by looking at them, and I could track a deer through mud that would fool most hunters. Fire prevention was my specialty. I'd saved more timber than most men see in a lifetime. The forest made sense. To me, it followed rules. Until that September, anyway. My partner Ray Donovan had been ranging these woods for 20 years. He was the kind of man who could navigate by moss growth and predict weather by how the birds flew. Ray taught me most of what I knew about reading the forest's moods. He was also the most level-headed person I'd ever met. When Ray got spooked, you paid attention. That morning, we got a call on the radio that changed everything. A logging crew of 12 men had been working near the old-growth grove up on Whisper Ridge. They were supposed to check in every evening at 6. It was now past noon the next day, and nobody had heard a word. Probably just radio trouble. I told the dispatcher, that ridge block signals something fierce. But Ray was already grabbing his pack. His face had gone pale, and his hands were shaking a little as he checked his gear. "Frank," he said quietly, I've been telling the logging company to stay away from that grove for years. The local tribes warned me about it when I first started working here. They say it's sacred ground. I'd heard the stories, of course. Every ranger in the Pacific Northwest heard Sasquatch tales from time to time. Loggers liked to scare each other with stories about giant ape men who could tear trees apart with their bare hands. I figured it was just campfire talk, something to pass the long nights in the deep woods. I'd served in the war. I'd seen what real monsters looked like, and they were all human. The drive to Whisper Ridge took us 2 hours on muddy logging roads. The rain kept coming down, turning everything into a grey, soggy mess. By the time we reached the worksite, my stomach was already starting to knot up. Something felt wrong even before we saw what was waiting for us. The logging trucks were there, all right, but they weren't parked. They were scattered around the clearing like toys thrown by an angry child. One truck was flipped completely upside down. Another was wrapped around a tree trunk that must have been 4 feet wide. The metal was twisted and bent in ways that didn't make any sense. Jesus Christ, Ray whispered. What could do this? I'd seen plenty of accidents in my time. Falling trees could crush equipment, and flash floods could push vehicles around. But this was different. The damage looked almost ... intentional, like something had gotten angry and taken it out on the machinery. The chainsaws were the worst part. These were heavy, professional saws that cost more than most men made in a month. They were twisted into scrap metal. Their chains snapped and scattered. One saw was bent into a perfect U-shape. I picked up a piece of the engine block and felt my hands start to shake. Whatever had done this was strong enough to tear steel apart like paper. Frank Ray's voice was barely above a whisper. Look at this. He was kneeling next to what used to be the crew's lunch area. Their metal lunchboxes were arranged in a perfect circle around the base of an enormous Douglas fir. Not scattered or dropped, arranged. Each one was placed exactly the same distance from the tree, like someone had measured it out. Inside the circle, someone had left 12 hard hats in a neat row. I knelt down and opened one of the lunchboxes. The sandwich inside was still fresh, with only one bite taken out of it. A thermos of coffee was still warm. These men had been eating lunch when something happened, something that made them leave everything behind and disappear without a trace. Where are the bodies? I asked. Ray stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the trees around us. I don't think we're going to find any bodies, Frank. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, no squirrels chattering in the trees. Even the rain seemed muffled, like the whole forest was holding its breath. In 28 years of hiking these woods, I'd never heard silence this complete. I pulled out my radio and tried to call the station. Nothing but static. Ray tried his radio too, with the same result. We were 50 miles from the nearest town, and now we had no way to call for help. We should head back, Ray said. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Get more men and come back tomorrow. But something made me walk toward the tree line. Call it curiosity, or maybe just stubbornness. I'd seen what war could do to men. I'd seen villages burned to the ground and ships torn apart by bombs. But what I found in that grove was about to show me something that made all of that look normal. As I got closer to the old-growth trees, the feeling of being watched got stronger and stronger. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my mouth went dry. These Douglas firs were old, maybe 500 years old. They formed a rough circle around a small clearing, like nature had planned it that way, or like something else had. Frank, Ray called out. Don't go in there alone. But I was already stepping between the massive trunks, and what I saw in that clearing made my blood turn to ice. The footprints were the first thing that made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. They were huge, at least, 18 inches long and almost as wide, but they weren't bare tracks or anything else I could identify. They looked human, with 5 clear toe marks and what appeared to be an arch, but no human foot was that big. The stride length between prints was 6 feet, which meant whatever made them had to be at least 10 feet tall. Ray, I called out, my voice cracking a little. You need to see this. The tracks circled the clearing 3 times, always staying exactly the same distance from the center. They were pressed deep into the muddy ground, which meant whatever made them was incredibly heavy. But here's what really got to me. The tracks were perfectly clear. No rain had collected in them, even though water was pooling everywhere else. It was like they'd been made after the rain stopped, which was impossible since it was still coming down. Ray came up behind me and let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. In the center of the clearing, someone had built something that made my skin crawl. 12 small piles of rocks, each one about 3 feet high, arranged in a perfect circle. Between each pile, strips of flannel cloth were tied to low branches, pieces torn from work shirts. The cloth fluttered in the breeze like prayer flags, but there was something wrong with the pattern. It reminded me of the ritual markings I'd seen in some Pacific islands during the war, the ones the natives used to ward off evil spirits. This wasn't here yesterday, Ray said. His face had gone completely white. I walked through this clearing yesterday morning, and it was empty. I pulled out my notebook and started sketching the layout. It's funny how focusing on the details can help you stay calm when your brain is trying to panic. The rock piles were all exactly the same height, and the distance between them was precisely measured. Whoever, or whatever, had built this new geometry. That's when I noticed my watch had stopped. The hands were frozen at 3:33, even though it was clearly mid-afternoon. I tapped the crystal, thinking maybe moisture had gotten inside, but the second hand wouldn't budge. Ray, what time do you have? He looked at his wrist, and his face went even paler. 3:33. That's impossible. This watch never stops. The silence in the grove was getting to me. It felt like the whole forest was listening, waiting for something to happen. I'd experienced quiet before, the kind of deadly quiet that comes right before an enemy attack. But this was different. This felt like we were the ones being hunted. I was about to suggest we head back to the trucks when I heard it, a sound that made every muscle in my body tense up. It was breathing, slow, deep, and way too loud too. Be human. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the massive tree trunks. Do you hear that? I whispered. Ray nodded, his hand moving slowly toward the .38 on his belt. Something's watching us. The breathing got closer, and with it came a smell I'll never forget. It was like wet fur and rotting leaves, but underneath that was something else. Something wild and ancient that made every instinct in my body scream run. Then I saw movement between the trees. Just a flash of brown fur disappearing behind a trunk that had to be 8 feet wide. Whatever it was moved without making a sound, despite its size. I'd tracked enough animals to know that nothing that big should be able to move that quietly. There, Ray pointed to our left. I saw it too. For just a second, I caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong in any forest I knew. It was tall, maybe 12 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. But it was the eyes that froze me in place. They were intelligent, human-like, but older somehow, ancient. The thing looked right at me for maybe 2 seconds, and in that moment I felt something I'd never experienced before. It was like a voice speaking directly inside my head, not in words but in feelings and images. I saw flashes of this forest as it had been hundreds of years ago, before any white man had ever set foot here. I saw great gatherings of creatures, like this one, living in harmony with bears and wolves and eagles. And I saw anger, deep, burning anger at what humans had done to the sacred places. Then it was gone, moving through the forest without disturbing a single branch. Did you hear that voice? Ray asked. His face was pale and sweaty. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The voice was still echoing in my head. You do not belong here. That's when we heard the screaming. It came from somewhere, deeper in the forest, high-pitched and terrified. Humans screaming. One of the missing loggers was still alive out there, and he was in trouble. Ray and I looked at each other, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes. Every instinct told us to run back to the trucks and get out of there as fast as possible. But we were rangers. We'd sworn an oath to protect people in these woods, even if it meant putting ourselves in danger. We have to go after him, I said. Ray nodded grimly and checked his pistol. Stay close. Whatever's out there, it's not natural. We followed the sound deeper into the grove, past trees so old they might have been growing when Columbus landed in America. The screaming came again, closer now, but there was something wrong with it. It sounded ... controlled, like whoever was making that noise wasn't entirely human anymore. The path between the trees seemed to shift as we walked, leading us deeper into the forest than should have been possible. I'd mapped this area myself, and I knew the grove was only about 50 yards across. But we'd been walking for 10 minutes and hadn't reached the other side. Frank, Ray said, his voice shaking, look at your compass. The needle was spinning wildly, unable to find magnetic north. We were lost in a grove I could have walked through blindfolded, following the screams of a man who might not be entirely human anymore. And somewhere in the trees around us, something ancient and angry was watching our every move. The screaming stopped abruptly, leaving us standing in a silence so complete it felt like being underwater. Ray and I stood back to back, our guns drawn, trying to watch every direction at once. The massive trees around us seemed to lean inward, blocking out what little daylight filtered through the rain clouds. "This way," Ray whispered, pointing toward a gap between two enormous Douglas firs. I think I saw movement, but as we moved toward the gap, Ray suddenly stopped. His whole body went rigid, and when he turned to look at me, his eyes were different, glassy, like he was looking through me instead of at me. "Ray, you okay, partner? The forest wants us to separate," he said in a flat, monotone voice that didn't sound like him at all. "You go left, I'll go right. We can cover more ground that way." I'd worked with Ray for 8 years. He was the most careful, methodical ranger I'd ever known. He would never suggest splitting up in a dangerous situation. Something was wrong with him, but I couldn't figure out what. "No," I said firmly. "We stick together." Ray blinked a few times, and for a moment his eyes cleared. "Frank, did I just... What did I just say? You wanted to split up." "Jesus." He rubbed his forehead with his free hand. "I don't remember saying that. It's like someone else was talking through me." That's when we heard the footsteps, heavy footsteps circling us, staying just out of sight behind the massive tree trunks. But these weren't the only sounds. Mixed in with the footsteps were other noises, the padding of bare paws, the clicking of wolf claws on stone, the heavy breathing of large animals. "We're surrounded," I whispered. A wolf stepped out from behind a tree about 30 feet away. Then another. Then a black bear emerged from the opposite direction. Within minutes, we were encircled by every dangerous animal in the Olympic forest. Wolves, bears, cougars, even a few elk that should have been scared of predators. But they weren't fighting each other. They were all looking at us with the same strange intelligence I'd seen in the tall creature's eyes. "This isn't natural," Ray said. "Animals don't work together like this." The bear stood up on its hind legs and made a sound I'd never heard before, almost like it was trying to speak. The wolves sat down like trained dogs, their yellow eyes never leaving us. It was like watching a nature documentary where all the animals had suddenly learned to cooperate. That's when I understood. They weren't just animals anymore. Something was controlling them, using them like pieces on a chessboard. "Ray," I said quietly, "when you wanted us to split up, did it feel like your own idea?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, it felt like someone else was thinking through my brain." The circle of animals started moving closer, not attacking, just tightening the ring round us. They moved with perfect coordination, like soldiers following orders from an invisible commander. Then Ray started talking again, but this time his voice was completely different, deeper, older. "The loggers saw too much," he said in that strange voice. "They came to the sacred place with their cutting machines. They had to be removed." Ray snapped out of it, but he kept talking, and the words weren't his own. 12 men thought they could take what was not theirs. Now they served the forest in a better way, in a place where their axes cannot harm the ancient trees. I grabbed Ray by the shoulders and shook him. "Fight it. Whatever's in your head, fight it." His eyes cleared again, and he looked at me with pure terror. "Frank, I can see them. The loggers, they single quotes read ... They're not dead. They're somewhere else. Somewhere that looks like this forest, but different, older. And there are others there, hundreds of others, people who've been taken over the years." "Taken where?" "Through the doorway. Between the two great trees. There's a doorway, Frank, and it leads to their world." I looked where he was pointing, and saw them to Douglas. Firs that were bigger than any I'd ever seen, growing so close together their branches intertwined. The air between them seemed to shimmer like heat waves, but it was too cold for that. As I stared, I started to see images flickering in that shimmering space. Another forest, but one where the trees were even more massive, and the sky was a different color. "That's where they took the loggers," Ray said in his normal voice. "And that's where they want to take us." The animals moved closer. The bear dropped back to all fours and took a step toward us. A cougar I hadn't noticed before slipped out from behind a tree, its muscles coiled to spring. Then I heard the breathing again, much closer this time. The tall creature was coming back, and I could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on my chest. The air itself seemed to get thicker, making it hard to breathe. Ray suddenly grabbed my arm. "It's in my head again," he said through gritted teeth. "It's trying to make me, ... make me hurt you. I can't fight it much longer." I could see the strain on his face as he battled against whatever was trying to control him. Sweat poured down his forehead despite the cold, and his gun hand was shaking. "The trees," he gasped. "It speaks through the trees, through the roots. Everything in this forest is connected to it." A shadow moved between the giant firs near the shimmering doorway, 12 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. This time it didn't try to hide. It walked directly toward us, and as it got closer I could see details that made my hands shake. Its face was almost human, but longer and more angular. Its arms were massive, hanging down past its knees, with hands that could easily crush a man's skull. But it was the eyes that nearly broke my nerve. They held intelligence that was far older than human civilization, and a sadness so deep it made my chest ache. When it spoke, I heard the words both out loud and inside my head. "You have seen the doorway," it said in a voice like distant thunder. "You know our secret. You cannot leave." Ray suddenly spun around and pointed his gun at me. "I'm sorry, Frank," he said, but his voice was the flat, controlled tone again. "You have to go through the doorway. It's the only way." I looked into my partner's eyes and saw that Ray wasn't home anymore. Whatever was controlling him was using his body like a puppet. The thing I'd served with for 8 years, the man who taught me to read the forest's moods, was gone. The bear charged. The wolves leaped. Ray's finger tightened on the trigger, and I realized I was about to become the 13th person to disappear in the tall shadows of Olympic National Forest. I dove to the right just as Ray's gun went off, the bullet whistling past my ear and slamming into a tree trunk. The bear rushed past me, close enough that I could smell its rank fur and feel the heat from its body. I rolled behind a fallen log as wolves snapped at where I'd been standing just seconds before. "Ray," I shouted, hoping some part of my partner was still in there. "Fight it. Remember who you are." But Ray was walking toward me with steady, mechanical steps, his gun trained on my chest. His face was completely blank, like a sleepwalker. Behind him, the tall creature stood perfectly still, its ancient eyes focused on me with an intensity that made my whole body shake. "The forest is older than your species," it said, the voice echoing inside my skull. "We have protected the sacred places for 10,000 years. You will not stop us now." I raised my own gun, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. How do you shoot your best friend? Even if something else is controlling him, that was still Ray's body, Ray's face looking at me down the barrel of his pistol. "The loggers came with their machines," the creature continued. "They would have cut down the great trees, trees that have stood since before your people learned to walk upright. We could not allow this. So you took them to that other place," I said, trying to keep the creature talking while I figured out what to do. "Through the doorway. They serve the forest now, as they should have, from the beginning. They tend the ancient groves in our realm, where their axes cannot reach. They are happy there, in their way." A wolf crept closer, its yellow eyes locked on mine. I swung my gun toward it, but before I could fire, Ray spoke again. "Frank." This time it was his real voice, weak but unmistakably him. It's showing me things. The way this forest used to be. Herds of elk so big they covered the valleys. Salmon runs that turned the rivers silver. And these creatures, they're not monsters, Frank. They're guardians. They've been trying to protect what's left." The tall creature tilted its head, studying me. "Your companion understands. Why do you resist?" "Because you can't just take people," I shouted back. "Those men had families. They had lives. Lives spent destroying what took centuries to grow." The creature replied. "We gave them better purpose." Ray's gun wavered, and for a moment I thought I might be getting through to him. But then his face went blank again, and he started walking toward me once more. I made a decision that still haunts me to this day. As Ray raised his gun for a clear shot, I fired first. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun flying into the undergrowth. He hit the ground hard, crying out in pain, but it was his own voice now, not that flat, controlled tone. "Frank," he looked up at me, confusion and pain in his eyes. "What happened? Why am I bleeding?" The creature let out a roar that shook the entire forest. Birds erupted from trees half a mile away, and the ground seemed to vibrate under my feet. The wolves and bears backed away, whimpering like scared dogs. You dare wound one under our protection, it thundered. He's not yours to protect, I yelled back, moving to stand over Ray's wounded form. He's my partner, and I won't let you take him. That's when I noticed something strange. The animals were retreating, but they weren't going far. They formed a wider circle around us, watching but no longer threatening. And the creature itself had stopped advancing. You would fight the forest itself to protect one person, it asked. Damn right I would. The creature studied me for a long moment, its ancient eyes unreadable. Interesting. Your kind usually thinks only of themselves. Ray's family, I said, keeping my gun trained on the creature, even though I doubted bullets would do much good. He's not just some random person. He matters. The loggers also had families. Then send them back. Let them go home. Impossible. They have seen too much. They know our secret. If they returned, they would bring others. Armies of men with machines that could destroy everything we have protected. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Like they'll do if Ray and I disappear too. People will come looking. They'll bring dogs, helicopters, maybe even the military. You'll get more attention than you ever wanted. The creature paused, and I could almost see it thinking through the implications. What do you propose? Let us go. All of us. The loggers, Ray, me, everyone. We'll find another way to protect the grove. Legal ways. We'll make sure no one ever cuts down these trees. And if we refuse, I glanced down at Ray, who was trying to stay conscious despite the blood loss. Then I looked back at the creature. Then you'll have to kill us. And when our bodies are found, this place will be crawling with investigators. Your secret will be exposed to the whole world. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. The wolves and bears watched from their circle, waiting for their master's decision. The air between the great trees continued to shimmer, showing glimpses of that other world where the missing loggers were trapped. Finally, the creature spoke. You would promise to protect this place, to keep our secret. I swear it. And if others come with cutting machines, I'll stop them. Legally, officially, but I'll stop them. The creature closed its eyes, and I felt a strange sensation wash over me, like someone was reading my thoughts, examining my memories, testing the truth of my words. When it opened its eyes again, something had changed in its expression. You fought in the Great War across the sea, it said. You have seen what happens when protectors fail their duty. I nodded, surprised that it could read that far into my past. Very well, we will try your way. But know this, Ranger, if you break your word, if you allow the sacred trees to be harmed, we will take not just you but everyone you care about, and we will not be merciful. The creature raised one massive hand, and the air between the great trees began to ripple more violently. Through the shifting space, I could see figures moving, men in loggers' clothing, looking confused but unharmed. One by one, the missing crew members stepped through the doorway back into our world. They looked around in bewilderment, as if waking from a long dream. Where have we been? One of them asked. Doesn't matter, I said quickly. Just get to your trucks and get out of here, now. As the loggers stumbled away through the forest, the creature fixed me with one final stare. Remember your promise, Franklin Ashworth. The forest will be watching. Then it turned and walked back toward the shimmering doorway. Just before it stepped through, it paused and looked back. Some boundaries should not be crossed, it said. Some places are older than your understanding. The doorway snapped shut, with a sound like thunder, leaving only two ordinary Douglas firs standing close together. The wolves and bears melted back into the forest, as if they'd never been there at all. Ray looked up at me from where he lay bleeding on the forest floor. Did that really happen? I helped him to his feet, supporting him as we made our way back toward the trucks. What do you remember? Trees, he said slowly. Really big trees, and something about a promise. That's all you need to remember. It took 3 hours to get Ray to the hospital in Port Angeles. I told the doctors he'd been accidentally shot during the search for the missing loggers, a story that no one questioned too closely. Ray recovered fully, though he never talked about what happened in the grove. Some things are better left buried. The official report was simple. The logging crew had been lost in a landslide triggered by the heavy rains. They were found 2 days later, suffering from exposure and memory loss, but otherwise unharmed. The twisted machinery was blamed on falling trees during the same landslide that supposedly trapped the men. No one questioned why 12 experienced loggers couldn't remember anything about being trapped. or why they all quit the logging business. Within a month of their rescue, no one wondered why the metal equipment was bent in ways that falling trees couldn't explain. I made sure they didn't. Within 6 months, I had convinced the Forest Service to declare the old-growth grove an sensitive area. No logging, no development, no commercial access. The official reason was to protect a rare species of spotted owl that I claimed to have discovered nesting there. The paperwork took years to process, but it worked. Ray transferred to a different district shortly after his shoulder healed. He said the Olympic forest didn't feel right to him anymore. I understood. Some experiences change you in ways you can't explain to other people. I stayed, of course. I had a promise to keep. Over the years, I've had to turn away dozens of hikers who wanted to explore the deep parts of the grove. I always find reasons: dangerous terrain, unstable trees, protected wildlife. Most people accept my explanations and head to more accessible trails. The few who don't listen, who try to sneak in anyway, never make it very far. They come back after an hour or two, looking confused and unsettled. They could never quite explain why they changed their minds about hiking deeper into the forest. They just know they don't want to go back there. Sometimes, late at night when I'm patrolling the forest roads, I catch glimpses of movement between the massive trees, shadows that are too tall and move too quietly to be human. I never approach them, and they never approach me. We have an understanding. The animals in that part of the forest are different now too. More intelligent, more aware. Bears that step aside when they see my ranger uniform. Wolves that watch me from a distance but never threaten. It's like they know I'm supposed to be there. My watch still stops at 3:33 whenever I get too close to the grove. I've replaced it twice, but the new ones do the same thing. Some effects of that place seem to be permanent. I've been promoted several times over the years, offered positions in different forests, even a desk job in Washington, D.C. I always turn them down. My work is here, protecting a secret that most people would never believe. Sometimes I wonder about those loggers who spent time in that other world. Did they see glimpses of what our forests used to be like before we started cutting them down? Did they understand why something ancient and powerful would fight so hard to preserve the last sacred places? I think they did. That's why they all quit logging. That's why some of them became environmental activists, spending their later years fighting to protect old-growth forests across the Pacific Northwest. They never talked about what changed their minds, but they carried the knowledge with them for the rest of their lives. Ray died 5 years ago, heart attack in his sleep. At his funeral, his widow told me something strange. She said that near the end, when the cancer was making him confused, he would sometimes talk about trees, massive trees that could speak without words, and guardians older than human memory who protected them. He said you'd understand what he meant, she told me. I did. I'm retired now, but I still live in the cabin near the grove. The new rangers think I'm just a stubborn old man who doesn't want to leave the forest. They don't know that someone needs to watch the boundary between worlds to make sure the promise is kept. Sometimes I get calls from researchers who want to study the unique ecosystem in the protected grove. I always find ways to discourage them. Some secrets are too dangerous to be studied, too powerful to be exposed to the modern world. Last week, a young ranger named Sarah asked me why I was so protective of that particular section of forest. She said she'd been hearing strange stories from hikers, tales of shadows that moved wrong and sounds that didn't belong to any known animal. I told her the same thing Ray told me when I first started working these woods. Some places are older than our understanding, and some guardians have been protecting them far longer than humans have been keeping records. She laughed and said, I sounded like I was talking about Sasquatch. I just smiled and told her that maybe the old stories weren't as crazy as people thought. Tonight, as I write this, I can hear them moving through the forest outside my cabin. Footsteps too heavy to be human, too careful to be random. They're checking the boundaries, making sure the sacred places remain undisturbed. I keep my promise, and they keep theirs. The grove remains protected, the doorway stays closed, and the ancient trees continue to grow toward a sky they've been reaching for since before my ancestors learned to build fires. Some boundaries should not be crossed. Some forests hold secrets that mankind isn't ready to understand. But as long as there are people willing to stand guard at the edge of mystery, those secrets will remain safe in the tall shadows where they belong.